to the, oh, thank you, Anne. This meeting's being recorded. If you don't care for that, you can leave. Welcome to the Concord Community Preservation Committee meeting of November 1. We have a full schedule with another 5 or 6 applications to get through. And so what we will do our very best to do is hold the presentations and question and answer periods to about 20 minutes if we can for each one. I know for the presenters that it may be a challenge, but please assume that the committee members have read your application closely. We'll have a couple of lead questioners on each application. And of course, we've had the benefit in most cases of having done a site visit and asked you questions there as well. So with that said, let's see, I just pulling up the agenda. One moment. The first application we will be reviewing tonight is for the Regional Housing Services Program. So Megan, I believe this one's yours.
Burton, do you want to do a roll call first?
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much, Eve. Yes, we do need to do a roll call. Sorry, guys, I'm jumping from one meeting to another. All right. So let's start with you, Eve.
Eve Eisenberg, Select Board appointee.
Thank you, Eve. Paul.
Paul Baum, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thanks, Edward. You're on mute, Ed. Still on mute.
Okay,
there we go.
Sorry about that. Ed Larner, Concord Housing Authority appointee.
Thank you, Ed. Sue.
Planning Board appointee.
John.
John Cratsley, a Select Board appointee.
Okay, and I'm Burton Flint, Select Board appointee. Oh, and Nancy. Yes.
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission appointee.
Great, thank you. All right, now with that, Megan, if you would like to walk us through your presentation on the Regional Housing Services Office, please.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Megan Zamudo. I'm the Deputy Town Manager here in Concord. I have met some of you, but not everyone, and it's nice to see you all as a group. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be before you today to request a CPC application for the Regional Housing Services Office for a portion of the funding for the next fiscal year. You know, I am new to Concord. I started in April, but I have been with the Regional Housing Services Office for much longer. I worked in the town of Maynard, and during my tenure, we were able to join the RHSO. And so we had a wonderful success with that program in Maynard. So I'm here before you to speak of Concord's role and our request, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of background there. So this has come before you before. The town of Concord is requesting CPA funding in the amount of $33,500 for our continued partnership in the Regional Housing Services Program. The RHSO was established in 2011 to oversee the administration of affordable programs in Concord. Right now, it's up to 10 communities. We had a new community join this last year, which is Natick. And they provide professional staff to support all 10 communities for administrative and monitoring needs of our existing affordable housing programs, and also working with us to develop additional programs and further regional housing efforts. So the RHSO meets community housing needs of its member communities, including Concord, by assisting us with monitoring. They monitor existing affordable home ownership and rental units to ensure that they remain affordable and in compliance with their deed restrictions. So there's a lot of work to get these units on the list here. But then once we have them on, there's a lot of work to make sure that they remain affordable. And that is a real key piece that we rely on the RHSO for. They monitor our SHI, which is our subsidized housing inventory. They supervise or manage our home administration, which is the Metro West Home Consortium. We've been a member since 2010, and the RHSO represents Concord through all administrative requirements for that program. They provide local support for our housing nonprofits. They manage resale of existing affordable housing units. We had a few this year, and they were a key asset in helping us navigate that complicated paperwork process. And last but not least, they provide regional activity support. And I can say that today I was on the phone with the director, Liz Rust, several times. We were pursuing a possible site for affordable housing. We were learning about a state program that might work to kind of try to add another unit or several units to the inventory. We were also sorting out an issue with a current affordable unit and trying to navigate that. So I can say that I really have come to rely on this resource, and I'm grateful to have professional housing experts, just a phone call away. So that's really the summary here. It's not a long one. I put together the application. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Megan. And you're going to get off easy tonight. The two questioners for this application is myself and Diane. Diane's unable to join us tonight, and more importantly, we have obviously a long history of supporting these applications each year for these services, and have seen the return on our investment that we've gotten. I guess just I would say, can you give us an example of, and maybe Elizabeth, if you want to weigh in as well, of funding that the town has secured or as a result of RHSO and in terms of, the supported community housing in Concord, just to illustrate an example of the return we get on this investment in RHSO.
I think that maybe I can step in on that, Megan.
Thank you.
So when you say, like actual funding grants, maybe that the town got, is that what you're talking about specifically?
I mean, grants are other things that you've been able to leverage. Just we know we get a lot of a tremendous amount of administrative support from the office in terms of managing all sorts of programs. But one of the things that's really struck me in the past is how much we benefit in terms of accessing affordable housing programs and the like through the efforts of the office.
Sure. I mean, what we've been able to do is bring, close to $1 million of home funds into Concord to support different projects, including the expansion of Peter Bulkley. And that was really sort of directly through our efforts to know that program and to bring those funds in. I think the town was prepared to fund that, through CPA and DHCD funding, but we were able to bring in some other funds to leverage that.
Great, thanks. I see I've got two hands up. Judge Crassley. John, you're on mute. Dylan.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you.
So Megan or Liz, when Megan uses the words they, who is they?
Sure, I'll pass it over to Liz, but it's a team of experts that consultants that work with Liz in the Regional Housing Services Office. So Liz, you can speak to your
Sure. So you're talking about the staff in our office. So you usually see me, but there's other people behind me. Like I don't do all the work. There are 5 people who are staffed in the RHSO. So we are all part-time contractors that Concord contracts with us. So I'm the director. We have someone who manages the home ownership and rental projects. We have someone else who's a land use planning expert. And we have someone who is more of a community local support expertise and is working on a couple of housing production plans. And then we have an open position, which would be an office housing coordinator.
And what is the overall budget when you combine all these participating towns?
Well, thank you for asking that. So we're looking at FY25. Our total budget is probably like around 400. I should have had that number right here. Our plan for FY25 is like 354. I guess I'm rounding, which is mostly staff. So Concord gets a little bit, there's a little bit of program funds, and Concord gets an administrative fee that's paid for out of the member towns of $21,000, which goes to rent and IT support and you know, other kinds of technology and what have you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Paul,
Yeah, hi, Liz, Megan, Liz, just a quick question on RHSO's role. These SHI, the official numbers of SHI, do those come from RHSO? So when we hear 10% or less or more, are you the official record keepers, or who keeps that?
No, the state is the official record keeper, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. What we do is make sure that their record keeping is accurate. We add units to the numerator part of that as they're appropriate, and we help the community strategize about adding new units and managing the SHI, but the official report and number comes from them. You're on mute.
Thank you, that's all I have, yeah.
okay. Thank you for your questions, and Elizabeth for your input, and Megan as well. Does anybody else on the committee have any questions? Okay, is anybody else in the audience have any questions regarding this application? Wonderful. Well, in addition to doing great work for the town, you guys have gotten through your presentation in 10 minutes, which has bought our other applicants extra time tonight. Megan and Elizabeth, thank you very much for the information and your application. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your consideration, and it's nice to see you all.
Thank you. Now that brings us to our next application, which I think Elizabeth Hughes, that's the Assabet River Pedestrian Bridge, I believe is, and I know I saw Elizabeth on here earlier. Oh, there you are. So if it would please, you've got the floor.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure I've met everybody, but I'm Elizabeth Hughes. I'm the Concord Town Planner. I'm not sure if we can get through this in 10 minutes, but I'll give it a shot. I'm gonna share my screen, and I have a very quick presentation. That's helpful. So this is an additional application for continued funding for the development of the Assabet River multi-use bridge and path in West Concord, connecting Baker Ave area to the West Concord Village. Just a quick summary, and I can't see my speaker notes, so give me a second. I don't even know how to work. I don't know why this is doing what it's doing, so give me a second. I guess I'll wing it. So this bridge concept was first thought of in 2007, and
Hold on, Elizabeth,
yeah.
I see your speaker notes. They're in a very narrow column at the far right.
Oh,
and
there they are.
Sides.
Okay, well, they shouldn't be there either.
Well, that I can't help.
Well, goodness. Any suggestions from anybody who knows Zoom and better than I do?
They were very cut off on my screen.
Okay, let me try this one more time. Nope. So that's okay. But now I can't see anybody. Oh, well.
Well, and we can't see your presentation.
Oh, well, see, this is just wonderful. Let's try this.
Yeah, now we see it all.
There we go. Now we see the speaker notes at the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
Do you want us to see the
Nope.
speaker notes? Oh, there we go.
You know what? Yes, actually, it doesn't matter to me. They're just my notes. So
Okay.
Okay, so can you see this now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, here, I'll try and make this smaller so you can, okay,
Yes.
so, yeah, so the, Assabet River Bridge was first, the concept was first thought of in 2007 when, the developer was imagining the redevelopment of the old Genrad building, which was 300 Baker Ave. But the concept started in the 2005 the long range plan was again formalized in the 2007 Village Center study, and then again in 2010 for the West Concord Village Master Plan. In 2016, we got it's technical assistance from the state's Central Transportation and Planning staff. They did a first mile, last mile study that highlighted the inadequacies of pedestrian and bicycle connections between the Baker Ave extension area and the West Concord Village. When they were actually out there doing a site visit, they saw people walking down the MBTA commuter rail bridge instead of walking all the way around. So that study really highlighted the need for this connection and the safety issues. What I forgot to mention is that in 2007, the developer for 300 Baker Ave provided the town $10,000 in transportation demand management funding to help mitigate that project. And that was specifically earmarked at that time to look at the possibility for a bridge connecting that site to the village. Finally, in 2017, Marcia Rasmussen and I were able, with the first mile, last mile study, were able to then use those funds to do an initial feasibility study. And then from there, in 2018 and 19, we hired GPI, who is the engineering consultant that's done all the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail work, and partnered with an architectural firm. The principals are professors at the Harvard School of Design, and they worked with us to look at different concepts, held 2 really well-attended public workshops. We went to the River Stewardship Committee and got their input. And then starting in 2020 is when we first asked for funding through the CPA and started really going after grants with the Mass Trails grant program. Okay. Here's just a quick synopsis of the funds to date that we have. In 2017, we used the $10,000 for the initial feasibility study. Between 2018 and 19, we received $35,000 from CPA, and then that was used to do the initial survey work of about 1,000 feet of riverfront, and then working with the architectural firm La Dahlman and holding the public workshops. And then in between 2020 and this funding cycle, so far we have received $542,000 in Mass Trails grant funding and $550,000 in CPA funds. We received $250,000 one year, and then I think it was in 2 years later we received another $300,000. That was FY23. We're currently seeking an additional $200,000 that is being leveraged as a match. We've already applied through the federal Reconnecting Communities pilot program for $400,000, and we'll be applying for Mass Trails for an additional $250,000. What that gets us is gets us to the finish line. And currently where we are at now, the funding that we have gotten, and I think I am gonna go back and And I'm gonna read one set of speaker notes. So currently, initially, we had looked at this project and had in the initial feasibility study, it talked about how much construction would cost. And that was roughly, what was it, 2017, roughly $2 to $3 million to construct. We started down the path of designing this project and submitting applications for CPA funding and through Mass Trails to get to 100% design. During that beginning initial process, working with GPI, the conversation started, well, even $3 million, that's a lot of money. And so we started exploring the idea of what would happen if we went through the transportation improvement program through the state to get federal and state funding for construction. And that's the funding that's been used to do the Bruce Riemann Rail Trail. During that time period, as everybody knows, the cost of everything, starting with COVID, has escalated just, significantly. A good example was the Habitat for Humanity house on Commonwealth Ave was originally spec'd to cost about less than $300,000 to construct. After COVID, the estimate was $720,000 to construct. So, but what we were able to do working through GPI was to get this project programmed and basically recognized through the Metropolitan Planning Organization to be included in the world of projects for the TIP. They do not fund projects in the Transportation Improvement Program till you are at 25% design. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's now being included in the TIP, the world of projects, between $8 and $10 million for the project. But the minute that you want to use federal and state funding, you now have kicked yourself into a process with Mass DOT for design. And I don't know if you can see my speaker notes. But the design is now required to follow the Mass DOT process. That process now includes scoping and design submissions at 10%, 25%, 75%, 100%, and then plans, specifications, and estimates, that design phase after you get to 100%. Plus you have to have all of your federal and state approvals, and then you have to go through specific right-of-way approvals. And so the process just got much more complicated. And so I just kind of want everybody to understand, because I know the amount of funding that's being requested, is a question, but that's kind of what the state does to you. It says, yes, we'll give you money, but now the cost to do your design and your construction drawings now has just escalated that price to get to that end. So that's, so I just wanted to give that little back history. But so what this last phase of funding will do, will get us through Mass DOT's design public hearing, will get us to 75, 100%, and plus our PS&E submission. It will get us through the final right-of-way plans, and it will get us through the environmental permitting. Because this is a wild and scenic river, there is an added permitting process to doing this work in the floodplain and in the floodway. And then I thought I'd do a quick, this is the initial level of detail that GPI did as far as the survey work, surveying significant trees, And I don't know if this comes up for everybody. Can you see that? Or is it too little?
You can see it.
Um, so surveying large trees and beginning to design the bridge in a way that takes into account, but because of how this bridge gets designed, having to deal with slopes, they've already done the borings, and so there's been a lot of work today, and I won't go into that. I think there was much more information in the application, but so this is the architect's rendering behind the bridge, and this is what they're calling the veil to help shield sound and buffer from the commuter rail bridge, which is, you can barely see it under there now. And this is an artist rendering, because this is a multi-use path. They're using, proposing to use different materials to basically delineate between the pedestrian area, their seating areas, and the bicycle portion. And this is the current working layout of the project. It's showing the bridge design. They are now having to work with 300 Baker Ave, because originally the bridge was going to end at the existing parking lot and be able to loop around, and now they're having to work with Novo to kind of redesign the end so that it loops around and makes it back to Baker Ave. And then we're now looking at how to connect the terminus on this end out to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So that has to be the quickest overview I can give you.
Thank you very much for that, Elizabeth. Just a couple quick questions before I turn it over to Sue. You briefly mentioned on the part around the Novo development and then the additional extension to the Bruce Freeman. Those are new elements, right? But within the scope of the TIP approval. And is Novo making any contribution beyond sort of designing their sidewalk so it lines up with this beyond that?
So what I can tell you is Novo is the connection to use federal and state funding. Any project has to be connected to public ways. You cannot have a project just terminate on private property. So the connection from Baker Ave and then to the other end to another public way, and the state has confirmed the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail will satisfy, or so
I see.
It is imperative that the project, and rightly so, connect out to Baker Ave. The proponents for the Novo project are voluntarily including in their design a path that will connect to the terminus of the bridge, approximately 225 feet to where the new building parking lot will be located, continuing approximately another 900 feet all the way around both buildings out to Baker Ave. They are designing it to meet Mass DOT standards. It is 10 feet wide, will have 3-foot shoulders. It will meet all ADA requirements, and it will be open and fully open as a public path.
And so will there be an easement in favor of the public right of passage there?
As part, that is a voluntarily, yes, they are doing that.
Right, they're doing the construction, but is it necessary for the state funding to be there to be an actual legal easement assuring public right of way across there?
Yes.
Okay.
But the caution we have gotten from the state is that the use of federal and state funds, the federal government is there are very strict standards on how and when a community moves forward in the, oh, did I just lose video? Oh, there we go. There's, oh, okay, so can you still hear me if I leave my
We can
video?
hear you. Yeah, we can hear
Okay.
you just fine, Elizabeth. Thanks.
There's very, very strict standards on when a municipality discusses right-of-way acquisition of the right-of-way. And it cannot be before certain steps happen. So that is why the conversation currently with Novo is they are voluntarily including all of these elements because it's to their benefit and they know that.
Okay.
All of these elements in their project. You will not see as part of the comprehensive permit discussion a requirement that they provide an easement. They are voluntarily offering that as part of their project.
Okay. I think I understand. With an interest in staying on schedule, Sue, you're the lead on this project. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. All right, so first of all, Elizabeth, you said that in order to qualify for the tip, the trail has to connect to a public way. Does it have to connect to a public way on both ends or only one end? I ask in case for some reason the Novo project were to not go forward.
So it will need to connect to Baker Ave. But before the Novo project was even envisioned, we had conversations with the property owner and they are in full support of providing whatever mechanism it takes to have that public connection to Baker Ave.
All right, excellent. And I had a little trouble following the detail in your schematic that you showed about how the trail will, the bridge will connect to the Bruce Fruman Rail Trail. How extensive would the modifications to the parking lot for the train station have to be? Is it a matter of taking it across existing grass islands and doing some restriping and so forth, or would parking spaces have to be moved or removed or anything like that?
So GPI is doing 4 different, I'm going to say options, because as everybody knows, that is not the best laid out parking lot to begin with. Yeah. So they're looking at, okay, here's the least option, and here's an option that could remove some spaces, but just would make the whole parking lot safer for pedestrians and vehicles. So that's still definitely a work in progress.
All right, very good. And especially with so many people working from home, it's no longer full up at the parking lot every single day like it was in the before times. I have just one other question. I was having a little bit of trouble understanding something in the application. Under item J, demonstrated financial need, there was an explanation of 400,000 being sought from federal Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhood Grant Program, which requires a 50% match, and 200,000 in CPA funds as a required match for the 250,000 in the next round of Mass Trails grant, for a total of 450,000. So I'm not sure. So the CPA request is just the matching funds to go with the Mass Trails grant, right? And that is the 400,000 from Federal Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods Grant Program, which requires a 50% match, is separate and not covered by this application at all. Did I understand correctly?
No, it will take both the Mass Trails and the CPA funding as a match for the federal grant.
Oh, okay. But then if it's a 50% match for $400,000, how come it's $450,000? I'm not sure we need to take up time in tonight's meeting. Maybe you could send a paragraph of explanation after tonight to clarify the language.
Okay, no, I say as far as the math, yes. The grant request is 400, So 50% is 200. So it will either be the CPA funds or the Mass Trail funds would be the match for the federal grant.
Oh, okay. Yes, that was not how I read it, but now I understand. Thank you. And that's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Sue. And Paul, you've got a question.
Yeah, quick question, Elizabeth. I think you said that this funding would take you to the finish line. Does that imply that this is the last cycle of CPA funding you'll be requesting on this project?
Be the last cycle for any design, engineering, or construction plans or permitting. I am hopeful that you know, so the TIP, the funding for the TIP, when you get to 25% design is when you can apply to be programmed for a particular year. So we'll be at 20, we'll have all the 25% designs ready, probably somewhere around April, I think, so that we can get programmed. And, you know, there's no match requirement, but the federal funds, they will fund the same with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. There were certain amenities that everybody in the community wanted, and the federal and state funds won't pay for that. So, you know, I'm hopeful that this whole project gets funded through the TIP, and there aren't any additional amenities because we're, you know, we're not going to have, you know, it's not a linear project like the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail where people wanted benches and different things. So I'm hopeful that there wouldn't be any additional requests as far as the construction, but you know, it all comes down to what the federal and state will pay for and what they won't.
Right. So we're through the design funding, but there's a possibility you might come back on construction or construction amenities. That's how I interpret your response.
Yes, I would say construction amenities.
Yeah, thank you.
John, you were next.
What is the anticipated size of the TIP funding, the actual cost of the bridge?
Between 8 and 10 million for the whole project.
And the 650,000 that you combine with our 200,000, almost all of that 650 is prior CPC money?
The previous funding?
The previous funding added up to from CPC, John, up to 585. This additional 200 would take the total CPC funding to 785. The prior amounts of 585 have been matched to one degree or another. This latest request for 200,000 would be matched by two different grant programs, which is that 600 and change number you've got. So all in all, we've essentially been matched at about 140% so far in terms of the CPC funds, something roughly in that. I just did that in my head, and I'm a lawyer, I can't do math. Plus then the additional TIP funding, assuming that proceeds.
Thank you.
I've been really busy writing grants.
Successfully writing grants. Eve, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, I actually have the most important question here, of course, which is, do you have an estimated arrival of a finished bridge in mind, Elizabeth? And you can have a range for that. What year will we be getting a bridge?
My goal would be fiscal year. It would be federal fiscal year. So construction starting, my hope would be 2027.
Great, thank you.
Just two quick comments, Elizabeth. First, I remember when Marcia was I believe going online and looking for used bridges that could be that we could buy to put in this space. This project has come an awfully long way since that time. And also, I just noticed from the picture, there's a bicycle trail and the pedestrian trail, and it looked like the bicycle trail had slatted wood in the same or lined in the same direction as travel, which will inevitably cause a bicyclist to get a
Other way around.
That's the pedestrian side.
That was so that the wheelchairs going down the pedestrian side to get their wheels trapped.
well.
Trust me, it will,
Well,
it will meet ADA compliance. I
I would love to see that moved 90 degrees, the slats. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, Elizabeth, and for all you've done in terms of all the grant writing and things to leverage the funding the CPC has provided in the past. I appreciate that very much. I believe that brings us to our next application, unless there were any other questions that I missed. I see, Keith, you've got your hand raised. Is that intentional in this? Yes.
Hi, yeah, Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. This bridge project is of great importance to the trust. We're supportive of the Novo 40B proposal, and it's essential that there be the bridge connection between Baker Ave and West Concord Village, the MBTA commuter rail. A bunch of us are working on making Elizabeth's prediction come true of having this bridge be completed, hopefully along the, not too far away from when the Novo 40B is up and operating. Just yesterday, the Secretary of Transportation was approached by several of us when she was here for the Phase 2B Bruce Freeman ribbon cutting, and said, well, you need to hear what the next big thing is for expansion of the rail trail in Concord. And it checks all the boxes that the state is interested in, of sustainability and safety and affordable housing. So it's going to be an important project for us all to advocate for, and it's a great project. Thanks.
Thanks for that input, Keith. Okay, that brings us to speaking of the Bruce Freeman Concord Prison Cemetery proposal. I believe that's Sam Williams and Liz Rust.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Sam was held up. I'll just take it, and if he joins, that's great. But I am not sure. So can I just share am I allowed to share? Yep, I could just
I believe so.
Yep. It looks like I can just do this, and then I could just do that, right? There we go.
Perfect. We see it. Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so I have a short presentation. You have the materials there, so this really just highlights some of the pieces that you've seen. So this is a request for funds for the Concord Prison Cemetery, and we call it Naming the Unnamed. There's a nice little picture there of the cross. Sometimes you see that cross as you're coming in Route 2 towards the Rotary. So why are we doing this project? What is the project? We can go into the project details, but always sort of start with the why. The purpose is to memorialize the 217 men and bring the prison cemetery into the fold of Concord's historic and honored cemeteries. And our goal is really to humanize the men and recognize the cemetery and Concord's history. So those are both kind of the same thing, though a little bit different. But we think that there's, that this is, part of the history there, and then there is the men. And I'll just say that so I think right, that the markers here are just numbers in the ground, and we thought, well, why don't they have the names there and all this? And we've met with the Department of Corrections for a long time for this project. It's been going on for a couple of years. And they do that, and they're still doing that today when you die in prison and no one claims your body, and now people are being buried in the Norfolk Cemetery. And it's really to protect the men from maybe the families of victims of the people buried there. And that was a perspective that I hadn't fully appreciated till I heard that from the DOC. So they were very sensitive to not having any plaques with the names on them, like right there. And of course, this is public information, but we wouldn't be, putting their names there like a memorial plaque or something like that we'd be thinking of. But anyway, so there's 4 components of the project. There's an interpretive panel and the contemplative seating areas. And I say here, like CPA, because those are the portions that your funds would go to, because I know there had been a question about, could CPA be used for some of the other pieces, like this online gallery, which is non-CPA, and the community curating piece, which would be also non-CPA. So non-CPA meaning there would be private fundraising for that. We've already received some grants and some individual generous donations. So this is very brief. So we have here these pictures. So again, these are very conceptual design. I mean, they're not really conceptual because they're pretty specific, but still they're not done to a survey. The work is going to be 100% in the Bruce Freeman right-of-way. So we're actually, we call it the cemetery project, but we're actually not touching the cemetery land. You can see there the cemetery land is with the red. I don't know if you can see those numbers, but the numbers correspond to the pieces over there to the right. And this is, again, very conceptual. Don't know that it's really going to look like this. On the left, you can see the bump out. It's a little bit off to the existing benches that are off to the right there. So it has a contemplative seating area. It has another interpretive panel, which would look very much like the ones that you have. It's really, part of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. It's really part of recreation. We put the application in as part of recreation because it's really associated with the trail. And so that's really it. This is the big project that you're funding, right? So the rest of the project is we have this online gallery, which is actually up and running now on the in a prototype mode off of the special collections in the library. And there's a little landing page here naming the unnamed, the Concord Reformatory Prison. So there it is. And then it has this. So for each person, you'd have a picture of their plot. We've been able to do a lot of research. We had a couple of interns write biographies for each of the people. And so you can see here, this is just, plot number, 115, Eugene Samuel Taylor. And here's what we have written in his biography. So again, each person has their own biography. And then down here, and we're sort of playing around with this, is the art that the Mass College of Art students had done. They did artwork for each person buried there. And we're going to be doing this so that the actual art piece is a little bit bigger. Here it's shown pretty small. But so each plot would have this. We're also looking into either a video or an audio that would put the person in more context of what was really happening. There's a lot of people like, in the Civil War or immigrants. There's probably a 40% immigrant factor coming in here. And so just putting more information there. So anyway, that's what the online gallery would be. There'd be a QR code on the interpretive panel, which would bring you here. And we're able to work with this and enhance it over time. And the library staff, Anka Voss, has been super helpful. And yeah, that's a really exciting part of the project. And then the community curating. So this is we're really looking to include in the Concord 250, probably like all the projects, right? Like everyone's coalescing with the 250. But anyway, the community curating is creating public awareness and education. It's that portion of the project. Hosting events and opportunities for the public, sponsoring and supporting any exhibition of the projection of the artwork and the illustrative work. So, so that's an important part of the project. It's really a community, aside from just bringing people to the actual physical site, there is the community education and outreach portion. So wait, isn't there, there's more slide, but I can't go anywhere further. What happened here? Here we go, timeline. So as I mentioned before, the project started a little while ago back there in FY21. So it started, someone in Concord actually had rung up CPO and said, hey, I got this great idea. Like, what do you think? We formed an advisory committee right away, knowing that a project like this really needs to have the cooperation and the input and the working together of people on the ground. The Mass College of Art students created the artwork. We had an event at the library, and then you can kind of continue there. So we write the biographies, and then looking in this fiscal year, doing the site design concept and definition. We're doing a survey of that particular small area just to make sure that we understand exactly where the right of way is relative to the trees and the grading and all of that. We're very sensitive to that. And designing with the panel, and we thought possible creation, would see about that. And then looking, of course, to have the project funding committed, and then moving into construction estimates, and moving on from there. And would like to really hit the ground running July 1, so that we can be, I mean, it's not a huge project, it's just that one area, but still, you know how these projects go, right? They take some time, in order for it to be done and finished. I think that's probably all I have. Yeah, thank you. So this is a picture of one of the, we're thinking of using this kind of bench. This is what's done in Walden Pond. So it's old curated wood. And we really like that. You'd have to have, because it's if you call it a bench, you have to have that back support for the accessibility. And then here's, like, we've cleaned up the cemetery. I don't know if cleaned up is the right word, but all the weeds and whatnot, so that the stones and the markers are pretty clear. And this is what they all look like now. We brushed them all off, and sometimes there was a little moss growing there. We got out there with our wire brushes. And I think from an ongoing basis, we're really committed to having an annual volunteer day. People love to come out and help, and working with the DOC to make sure that things stay maintained in the cemetery. But again, that's really outside the scope here. The DOC has been, and their crew have maintained this cemetery for, since its inception. So, for a long time, for, almost 200 years now, or 170 years. And which is great. I mean, there's a prison cemetery out in Rutland that was not maintained and now overgrown and gone. And you can imagine if they just left this and never mowed it, like, you would never find these stones. As it was, I had to get out there with a pickaxe and find 4 of them that were kind of buried. They do over time. The land takes over. So I think I'll just stop there. Is that enough of an overview?
I think I think that's very good start. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Sure.
I think for this we've got Eve and John. Eve, do you want to go start?
Sure. I just have a grab bag of comments and questions for you.
Sure.
Liz, the first one is just technical. On page 6 of your application, there's a second front page that has a different amount on it. And I'm just going to make a public announcement that we're striking that page, and I'm writing a big X on it, because I'm pretty sure that that's not supposed to be there, right?
No, I don't think so. Did I have a problem collating it when I did this? I'm sorry. Yeah.
But it's fine. I just wanted to say that that's not part of the application. Pretty clear that the
So
front.
I'm sorry, where was that? Let me just see.
It's the 6th page is on the back of, on mine, it's on the back of the expenses form. There's another application front page.
Yeah, that's just a that's an error in printing and distribution.
Right. Okay. Now that we've said that, I have a question for you about, thank you very much. You've answered like most of my questions in your presentation for clarifying what the CPA money was going for, this physical seating area. I have one question about that, and that is, I recognize that this is probably a stupid question, but I recognize that there's benches across the path, and having an additional seating area across from the benches, was there any thought about amongst the advisory group or the CPO to incorporate those benches into the situation with the kiosk? Or
well, so those benches, you can't see the cemetery from those benches, right? So we wanted to provide an area where you could actually see into the cemetery.
It's a viewing area.
Yeah, and we didn't want to disturb the existing rail trail, right? I mean, those benches are there. They have their own plaque. The plaque talks about, this other thing. So we really thought creating, and it's not really, so we kind of think of this as a contemplative place, a little bit more relaxed kind of than that. So, yeah.
Excellent explanation. Thank you. On the list of expenses is $10,000 for signage. I just want to say that that's actually pretty important. I think I don't think I ever would have run across this whole situation if somebody hadn't guided me there. Wondering if some of that signage could be used for, actual signage from the road, so people would know that this was there if they walk down the road, or what is that for, I suppose, the signage?
I'm sorry, let me just pull that up here.
This is different from the kiosk, I guess. Although on the picture, it says that the new signage structure with cemetery signage is the tag for the kiosk, so that's a little confusing. But I'm hoping that
Yeah, I think that we wanted to, we appreciated the need for some signage or some marketing or some posters or some things there. And I think that we don't have the detailed designs about that, but we wanted to earmark something in the budget for that.
it might be wayfinding of some kind.
Yeah,
That's great. And then
we just started working with the advisory committee on this. It's just sort of starting in terms of the detailed design. So just wanted to have a budget that had placeholders for the things that we thought were important without knowing all the details quite yet.
Okay, thank you. I just want to mention that this is also heritage awareness, and you could even argue that there's some historic preservation going on here as well. So it's ticking a lot of boxes that the CPA requests that we look into doing is in one project. So that's cool. Here's my very last question.
I just wanted to talk to that.
Yeah.
And I recognize that, but we're really not touching anything that is historic, right? Like this is all in the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So it's not preservation in any stretch, right? It might be historic appreciation and something like that, but I'm very sensitive to not wanting to include historic preservation because there's actually nothing historic. Like we're just not even on the cemetery land, right? Like we're very intentionally not going there.
No, it's up to the prison to maintain the cemetery because it's not a public space at all.
Right. So I think we call it sort of historic appreciation, right? Or something like that.
Or heritage awareness.
Yeah, awareness, a little softer term. Yeah.
Is any of this money or planning going toward contacting the families of the people? I mean, I realize that they're in this cemetery because nobody claimed their bodies, but that one fellow whose name you flashed up mentioned he had a son, and I was just wondering if anyone was going to try to reach out to these family members to let them know this was happening.
No, we have stayed within the public record in terms of the information. I suppose that could happen. And I wanted to also mention, I didn't say this before, but we've also not included the crimes that these men were convicted for in any of the biographies. So that's not part of what we're lifting up about the people. And usually we get a question about that. People are, well, what'd they do, right? And it's not about that. So it is a fine line though. But no, we hadn't really thought of that. And I don't know how, I mean, that's a whole nother project to go off and do that. And you have some experts there and we're not those.
Thank you.
Thanks for those questions, Eve. John.
Liz, when we were out there for the view, some of us went ahead up onto the DOC land to look at the markers. And we talked a bit at the time about public access. And I gather this is, which is a big CPC priority for most grants, but I gather here you're going to restrict public access. And will there, if that's truly necessary, will the public actually know that, or will there be people wandering up there anyway?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, John. Thank you for asking that. You could see in the picture, there's that fence that's being added, and that was really for the DOC. I don't know if that's the exact fence that would be used, but they want to allow the appreciation of the cemetery and not encourage access. They're concerned about liability and insurance and what have you, but they're not going to put a no trespassing sign. So that's what we've talked about. Like we wanted to stay, like how far could we go into the project without having a no trespassing sign and something a little bit stronger. They're not going to enforce that and like it is today, like people can just go, But so they're going to shut it down a little bit, you know, by putting that fence. But certainly you can go around in this, and they have ways that they get in there for their mowers, for example, because they mow the grass and all of that. So I'm not sure exactly how the design will go, but there won't be no trespassing, but there won't be a path that invites access. So it'll be something between all that.
And the $71,000 that uses the CPC money, and I assume some private money, the 71,000, does that finish the entire project? Or
Yes.
it's just, okay.
Yep. Yep. It's a small project. Like you can see what's included. I mean, this is like, again, conceptual estimates, but we got these from the landscape designer, and they're kind of familiar with this sort of work, right? Which was, you know, the stone dust paving and the grading and the, you know, the little bit of work there, and then by the bench and by the, you know, put in the sign and, you know, a little bit of fencing, right? So, so we'll see, you know, when we actually go out and get construction bids, you know, sometimes they're a little bit different, but hopefully we're on target.
Thank you.
But it is the budget is the whole project. Like we're done. When this is over, we're done.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for your questions, John. Sue, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, but there will be public access because the project is the 3 benches and the kiosk, and they will be publicly accessible. Am I?
Oh, of course. It's public access to the cemetery itself. That's what I meant to say.
Right, not to the cemetery itself, but the entirety of the funds you're requesting for will go toward publicly accessible stuff.
Sure, it's the funds are for the contemplative seating area, I call it, right? So that's completely available, and it's really part of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is what it is. Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks for the question, Sue. Unless there's any other questions from the board or other attendees, Elizabeth, thank you very much for your information on this and for spearheading this project. Appreciate the application. That brings us to our next application, which is for some restoration work on the Robbins House. Jen Turner, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So my name is Jen Turner, and I'm the executive director of the Robbins House. I'm very new to the job. I've been here less than a year. As many of us know, it's really hard to preserve a historic home. We at the Robbins House do not have a completely steady revenue stream, as we are not allowed to charge admission to the museum. So we rely on grants and donations to continue to preserve the house and tell the stories of the Robbins and Garrison families to thousands of visitors each year. So that's why we're here tonight. So I just wanted to kind of recap some of the things that we addressed at the site visit. So this is just a little brief history of the Robbins House. It was built in 1823 at the Great Meadows. And we at the Robbins House joke that it's sort of the mobile home of Concord because it moved 3 times. It was originally the home of the first generation of descendants of formerly enslaved African-American Revolutionary War veteran Caesar Robbins and by fugitive slave Jack Garrison and his family. So eventually the house was moved in the 1870s to Bedford Street. And then in 2011, it was moved to its current location at 320 Monument Street. And it's really important to talk about the context of the CPA with the Robbins House as well, because the Robbins House received 3 CPA grants between 2010 and 2012 that really helped to fund the development of a historically appropriate house appearance, as well as funding landscaping that was historically appropriate to its new space in Concord as well. And this is a historically significant home. I'm going to talk about this at the end, but Ellen Garrison was raised from birth in the house and really began her crusade for civil rights as a child in Concord. And so it's really a house that has both local historic significance, but it also has resonance around national civil rights struggles as well. And in the last 10 years, there's been several preservation issues that have popped up in the museum. And since taking over as the executive director, I've been working to sort of think about some of the ways that we can help preserve and maintain the Robbins House for obviously future generations of museum visitors. So we worked in conjunction with Larry Sorley, who was the architectural historian who helped restore the Robbins House in 2011. And in consultation with him, there are several issues that we attempted to address in the grant application, including the ones listed here. In particular, Larry noted the uneven weathering of the house, which many of you noted in the site visit in the fall, earlier in the fall. In 2011, although when the home was built in 1823, neither Peter Robbins or Jack Garrison, who lived in the home, had the extra funds to actually paint the exterior or the interior of the house for that matter. We do know that it probably would have been unpainted in the 19th century in 1823 when it was built. But in 2011, for a variety of reasons, a preservative coat was added to the home, to the museum, that basically caused uneven weathering, including the contrasting that you see in the photo between the light and dark. And Larry Sorley believes that the black stuff, for lack of a better word, that is on the house is actually fungus that has died because of some of the chemicals, the zinc and the preservative coating. And so part of the preservation process to help maintain the exterior, we're hoping to apply a fungicide to both the exterior of the house and the roof line in order to preserve the wood and then paint it as well. And so these images also show the roof line, which, as we mentioned in the site visit, did have that moss growing on top. And Larry recommends the same sort of process on the roof of the house as with the exterior. So pressure, fungicide first and then pressure washing. Now at the site visit, we did talk about the idea of actually installing storm windows, so exterior storm windows, because of the fact that there is a lot of decay and poor weathering with the windows. And I know that many people on the site visit were surprised at that. And so I just wanted to mention that I did mention that to Larry Sorley in the aftermath of the site visit. He did send a detailed email that I can forward to the committee to talk about why he believes the exterior storm windows are a good thing for the house, even though they may change the look of the house on the front. But he believes he was actually he was telling me that other historic houses in the Concord area are actually grappling with the same sort of issue. And he mentioned that he was the architect who actually recently oversaw the installation of similar storm windows on two of Acton's oldest structures owned by the Ironwork Farm. Both the Faulkner House and the Jones Tavern in South Acton had these same type of exterior storm windows that Larry Sorley is recommending for the Robbins House installed. And both of the house's windows were actually paid for with CPA money from Acton. So like I said, we are aware of sort of the surprise of many people at the site visit around that issue. But it is something that we're trying to address. And like I said, I do have an email that I can forward to the committee that talks about the rationale even further. Some of the other issues that we talked about as well is that this is obviously in 1823 when it was built as a post and beam house. And so there's a joint issue. So we talked about that as well. We did talk about the fact that in 2011, David Fisher designed a landscape and a pathway that was historically appropriate to the museum. But over the last decade, the issues have arisen with the pathway, including the fact that it's the gravel no longer abuts the walkway into the house. And so we believe that it's important to re-gravel the walkway as well to maintain the landscape that was designed originally in 2011 to preserve the historic nature of the landscape and the house in its new location in the parking lot at Minuteman Park. I know I also mentioned as well that the woodpecker is my nemesis. I've had to deal with this is an understatement, but I've been very frustrated with the woodpecker who is destroying part of the northwest corner of the house, particularly on the board trim. And so Larry Sorley is also recommending that we replace the board just because of the fact that there's so much significant damage because of the dreaded woodpecker as well. You can see the holes at the top. I put reflector tape out. I've done everything I can try to do to scare this thing away, but it's done significant damage over the museum season this year as well. And then this is just to reemphasize the preservation costs of our grant application, which is roughly about $30,000 for some of the preservation needs at the Robbins House. And I just wanted to end by saying, you know, we really believe that the Robbins House, like I said at the beginning, is historically significant, not only to Concord, but also to the nation, particularly because of Ellen Garrison in particular. And many of you know her story. She was one of the first African-Americans to actually challenge legitimacy of the 1866 Civil Rights Act. She boldly walked into a train station in Baltimore in May of 1866 and was forcibly ejected. She sued in court, and although her court case was ultimately dismissed, she really helped to sort of be part of the group of individuals during Reconstruction who were fighting for racial equality in the United States. And, you know, Rosa Parks is famous in her lifetime for doing very similar things to Ellen Garrison. And, you know, decades before Rosa Parks, Ellen was really sort of a spearheading this movement in the time period. And so we're proud to acknowledge her at the Robbins House, and we're very grateful for the support that the town of Concord has provided in the past, given how significant our little house is to the history of the United States. And I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you very much, Jen. I think this application, our leads on this are John and Edward, if I've got that correct. I see, John, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Very detailed and very important to our town and nationally. I just had a question about public access.
Sure.
What are the current, is it seasonal or what are the current hours?
It's seasonal. We're open Memorial Day to Labor Day, 6 days a week, except Tuesdays from 11 to 4. And then after Labor Day, we're open Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays from 11 to 4 until the end of October. We do offer, and we're hoping to expand educational programming opportunity as well during our off season as well.
And I think you answered my question with your last slide. This is a package. It's not a package number. It's got specific items. You've got specific costs attached to specific repairs.
It does. Mike Godin, who works with the Robbins House in the past, you know, came up with the estimates needed for the preservation work. So we do have, you know, specific estimates, and that is found within the grant itself.
And then do I read the grant correctly that there is no alternate or private funding contemplated?
I mean,
to join your money, to join
I
our
mean,
money.
I'm in the middle of grant writing. I disappointingly just found out that I didn't receive a grant that I thought might be able to help offset some of this. So, you know, I'm working on other grants at the moment, but when I applied, I don't have any specific money allocated at this moment.
Thank you.
Ed, did you have any questions? We may have just lost Edward. He was here a moment ago.
He was.
1, 2. Okay, well, we still have a quorum. Nancy, yes.
Jen, I have a question, and then just to fill in a conversation I had also with Larry. Is this house on the national?
you called.
Is this house on the National Register?
It is not. Well, as far as my understanding, it is not. I might have to check with Ann Forbes about that, but based on my understanding of reading the structural report, we are not eligible for the National Register because much of the exterior is not original to the 19th century, but it was restored in 2011 to look as, based on, other houses in the area and things like that. So it's not, I don't believe it's eligible for the National Register based on that, but I would have to probably check with Ann Forbes.
That's actually what I'm thinking too, because restoration is a very specific word.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, a lot of the work is based on what other houses of the time were like. And I think maybe the windows are careful reproductions of what have been. So a lot of the fabric is not original. I noticed some of the fabric inside the house is, but the house also has been altered over the years, as so many houses have been.
Right. I mean, even as early as 1870, after the Robbins, Garrison, and Hutchinson's families lived there. There's a comment that from I think like John Keyes, who said that something like the Irish family who owned it next, had transformed it. So, even by 1870,
the wallpaper, I guess, is from that era.
So even by 1870, I mean, there were obviously changes.
Which is fascinating too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I had a long talk with Larry. I said, "What do you think?" and we had a long talk, and he actually persuaded me that the work is fully within a rehabilitation category for the Secretary's standards. And while I would prefer that maybe there was not going to be a fake corner on your house, I think it does fall under that need for, it's not protecting historic fabric per se, but it's protecting the house in a way that conveys that feeling. So that I felt better about that. So
that's good, because I know you're concerned.
Thanks for that input, Nancy. Paul, you've got your hand raised.
I do. Hi, Jen. Thank you for the presentation. And I may have missed this because I was reading while you were talking.
Okay.
Reading your application. The estimates you have here were provided by Godin Construction, by one firm.
Yes.
They will manage all these pieces.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think we had to, sort of bid out. So Mike Godin has done a lot of work with the Robbins House over the past decade, and so he would be ready to go as of next July.
No, I wasn't suggesting you had a bid. I'm just wondering their role. So they will oversee and manage, and their costs of doing it are built into these pieces. I see that at the end. The 15% O&P, I guess, is part of that. So okay.
Yes.
That firm has done work on structures in the national park as well.
Yeah, he's great.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's all.
Next, Sue.
Yes, I must have missed this. Maybe I missed this when I read the application. Did I just understand you, Jen, to tell Nancy that the windows are reproductions rather than original?
I did mention that in the application. Hold on, let me find it.
Never mind, then I just missed it. So then my question is, what is the purpose of reducing the historic look by covering them with storm windows? Since they are not historic originals, you could let them look more historic and degrade, and then replace them if they degraded too much. Is it simply to save on maintenance costs, or is there some deeper purpose to protecting some kind of original part of the house?
It's not, the windows are not historic. I mean, they're custom made to be restored to look like that. But Larry Sorley, in this consultation meeting that we had, I mean, he just believes that it would help sort of preserve the exterior, the way, the exterior looks for as long as possible. So that's why he recommended that.
Okay, so when you say the windows, you mean the glass or
The sashes.
sashes? So then what would it be protecting if it's protecting the sashes?
I mean, it would be protecting the wood.
And the wood is original.
No, but he believes that that there's, because of the weathering, he's worried about the fact that the weathering of, you know, the material on the front and the sashes, it would be better to sort of to preserve, you know, to protect the wood from further deterioration, just because, you know, over the next several years, it would be more of an issue
So it's a maintenance.
to preserve. Yeah,
All right.
I mean, he's worried about like decay of the wood.
Right, but the wood isn't original.
No, but I mean, it is part of the exterior of the house is not original, but if it decays, you know, without preservation, then, you know, then the inside of the house would also be impacted. So, I mean, the whole structure of the museum.
So it's a matter of cost for maintenance. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. You good, Sue? All right. Thank you very much, Jen, for that presentation. Appreciate it. Appreciate the application. With that, we will turn to our next one, which is the Concord Scout House. And is it Robert? Yeah, I'm going to mess up your last name.
That's okay. So this is Robert Keeney, president of
Keeney. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
All right.
You've got the floor.
Should be nice and quick. So Concord Scout House, as I think probably everybody knows, we're a private nonprofit, but we take care of the Concord Scout House building, which was a barn converted into the Scout House in 1930 and is used by Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts for no cost, and then by others, many people for reduced costs, such as Contra Dance that will be here tomorrow night, Contra Dances that are here on Monday night, and other activities. So we have had a problem in the last few years where we've been trying to maintain our floor for a long time. In the last few years, the floor has finally starting to fail us. And we realized we really had to replace it sooner rather than later. So this is a $65,000 project, and we're asking for $35,000. The floor is splintering. This is a tongue and groove floor. In the past, not in the past 10 years, but in years before that, the floor had been sanded and refinished, and it gets used, about 300 days a year. And it's just finally hit the end of its life. We had been trying really hard in the last 10 years to keep the floor from failing by adding a layer of finish every year, but it is now splintering, and a lot of groups actually use the hall without shoes. So that is a problem that we can't ignore. We have to deal with. So that's really that's the project. And I know this is a long meeting already, so I'll take questions.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Our leads on this are Nancy and Sue. So I'll try.
Go ahead, Sue. Where'd she go? Whoops.
She's up there.
All right, so I will go ahead. Obviously, splinters are bad for anyone, but as you mentioned before, it's particularly important for dancers to have a properly sprung wood floor. I have just one question for you, which is, have you managed to clear up the problem of the dating of your IRS determination?
The IRS determination, the letter, I thought we had. I will make sure we have. If that is not clear.
It's 2009, I think.
What? No, it's 2019 that expired.
Oh, sorry.
2019.
But it does need, all right, if you'll just send that along to the committee, that will be very helpful.
All right, I will get that back to you.
Nancy?
I had more of observation. I've I was really so happy to see that this is a very concisely described project. And it's very clear. I think the floor, I'm persuaded, and maybe other people can tell me differently, that the floor is probably only going one direction. And seems like it's increasing in rapidity in its decline. The identical materials were referred to here in the application. I'm wondering, I know the company that's you've been talking with and's been behind these estimates is a renowned company, and certainly they know how to get the material. Are you confident, or is it clear that you can get identical replacement, or is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
hard to come by?
Yeah, no, it's not particularly hard to come by. It's a thinner strip wood floor.
Yeah.
But they've assured us that it won't be a problem.
Okay, and you did include an allowance for unforeseen conditions. I hope that's sufficient. But have you investigated that at all? Is there any way to investigate that around the pillars? Is that where you would expect to see it?
Well, we don't. We're a pretty clear structure. There aren't any pillars, so.
Oh, I thought they were. Oh, I thought they were going to be nailing things around the joist. Oh no, the joist. Sorry.
Joist. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
We have no reason to believe that they're damaged, I guess is the short answer to that question.
Okay.
We haven't,
might be catching it.
Yeah, the lower level is used as well. So if if there were some other damage, we would see it. We would expect to see it below.
Yeah. And is the stage in the same state of disrepair?
No, the stage is not.
That gives you a little cushion then for unforeseen conditions, maybe. But I was very impressed by the amount of use and the number of organizations that would be missing out on this facility if it wasn't repaired, if the floor wasn't secured. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Eve.
Yeah, hi. I just have one quick question is what is the size of the floor in square footage, the main floor, not the stage?
All right. I assume that's in my application. I'm looking back at my application, which I thought it would be in. Thought we had a full square footage number. Oh, I know it's in the bid document and in the estimate.
Doesn't say square footage though.
It doesn't say. I will get that for you.
Yeah.
I do not know it off the top of my head, and I don't want to.
That's okay. I was just I was prepared with my calculator on my screen here to calculate the price per square foot of the floor because I know those numbers and I'm fairly certain that this is low, but whatever.
Yeah,
all good.
We got two prices, so we feel pretty confident in that they've given us a good price. It is an easy job in that it's a giant, there's nothing to go around. So I think that might be part of the reason why we've asked them to make sure that that's the price for, next year, plus we added a little bit. So we're feeling reasonably confident about that number.
It's great. No one uses the oil-based finish even on commercial floors anymore, but so I'm interested to see how that's going to work out for you.
Yeah, they have experimented here. We've experimented with a number of finishes over the time, trying to find the hardest one. So
good. It's good work. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. John.
I'm just curious how long the contra dancers will have to wait.
They shouldn't really have to wait at all. They are not here in August. So we're hoping to do it in the month of August. And we shouldn't inconvenience anybody.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, I have a quick carpentry question. Has anybody looked at the subflooring and the condition of the subflooring? I assume it's on subfloor and joist. Is that in great shape? When you any mysteries under there?
Yeah, we believe it is because we can see in spots the underside. and it's solid, and we know there's not water coming through. We know there's not rot coming through, so we are pretty confident. We have not ripped up any of the floor, you know, so but we just have no reason to believe that there's it would be hard for there to be other kinds of damage since it's well sealed from the top, and we can see some of the bottom. So
Okay,
we'll see.
I hope that's true.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, with that, seeing no other hands raised, thank you, Robert, for your time this evening and your presentation. Appreciate that. We will go ahead and move to the next, which is a historic preservation survey of pre-1775 structures in town. And that's being presented by Anne and Alan Bogosian from the Concord Historical Commission. So Anne, Alan, you have the floor.
I'll defer to Anne to start. Anne has the presentation.
Okay, great. I'll start by sharing the screen. So let's see. Okay, so as you just said, it's a request for $50,000 for a historic preservation survey for about 90 reported pre-1775 structures in Concord. And we just wanted to, of course, first thank you for the funding that you provided last year for a historic preservation plan. The startup meeting is going to be on Monday with this group, Heritage Strategies, LLC. They've done work all over the country on national heritage areas and even world heritage sites in Texas, Niagara Falls, and Freedom's Way right here in Massachusetts. Plus, they've done community-wide surveys for Sudbury, Falmouth, Lenox, and Beverly. So I think we're really lucky to have them. And they're going to help, you know, what they're discovering in their plan will help us focus this this project. But we're not quite there yet. So I am sorry that the application couldn't be more specific at this point. But I just did want to sort of give you the basics, right? So there's 3 steps to historic preservation planning. This is like the primary role of the Historical Commission, these community-wide, you know, planning documents and identification and evaluation. Surveys are like what historical commissions do, and it's written into Envision Concord too. Plus, of course, there are the goals for Rev 250 coming up. So this is why we chose, obviously, the pre-1775 houses. And, you know, the Semi-Sesquicentennial Commission is charged with orchestrating the largest and most inclusive anniversary observance in our nation's history. And Concord's goals also are, you know, they mentioned the ideals of liberty, the unity of mankind, and telling a more complete story of America. So it's not just a monoculture, it's a, you know, the complex multicultural history of America. So this survey, it will help Concord fulfill its responsibility to provide accurate, authentic, and relevant interpretation of Concord's historic resources from diverse perspectives. Of those 90 properties that are identified in the macro survey forms, about 1/3 are identified as witness structures to the battle. But that list is sort of not definitive, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Another 1/3 have questionable dates. We're not even sure if they were standing in 1775 or not. The early survey forms, and I'll show you an example. They, you know, they're often incomplete. They rarely address. I mean, they were terrific, right, for the time in the 1990s. But they didn't have the internet at that point. It was a sort of a volunteer effort that was overseen by Ann Forbes, who's terrific, obviously. But you know, there's so much more available to us now. There's been so much research done by, you know, the Robbins House and others, historic resource forums. And then those early survey forms rarely address the multicultural history. And then through let's see. Oh, and we need to narrow down those 90 buildings. Obviously, $50,000 wouldn't cover a complete survey of all of those structures. So we'll be looking at that over the course of this year and narrowing them down. I mean, some of them obviously are owned by the National Park Service, and they've been so well studied that they don't need anything more. That's sort of an overview. And then just to give you a sense of where these where these lists are coming from, there's the Macros lists. You just do a quick search, for Concord and the date range, and then you get, where is it? 106, items, which include roads and things too. So that's one source. And then there's the Battle Road Scenic Byway Corridor Management Plan that has a list of witness houses in each of these locations. Concord has the most in this. I think it has 33. But many of the ones, I mean, there are others that don't show up on this list. Here's, of course, the map in the Battle Road Scenic Byway Corridor Management Plan. There are these new lists that have been created. I think this one was created by the Robbins House staff, and it's used by visitor services. So now we have a better understanding about the enslavers and the enslaved people in Concord. But it would be great to match those names to the structures. And then I just wanted to show you, so I'm running through this really quickly. I wanted to show you a sample of some of those structures that are that seem like they would be witness houses based on the dates and their locations, but they're not on the Battle Road Scenic Byway list. So that, these lists just need a really close look through. These were actually in the application. So there's the block house. Here it is standing. This is shown in the image owned by the Special Collections in the library, created in 1777 of the Concord jail. And the block house shows up in the background of that. The house still exists, but it's been moved to Lowell Road now. So that certainly needs more study. And supposedly that was a garrison house. It was also a house that had war stores in it in 1775. And there were enslaved people in it as well. And of course, William Emerson lived here, and the Blisses lived here. So, I mean, there's so much going on with this house, and you need to know more about it. Another really interesting one is a house that it's called the Emmeline Barrett Boarding House. But if you read through the Macros form, it talks about Martha Moulton, who was a widow who was in downtown Concord when the British soldiers were there, and she has she actually sued the state for funding because she was a patriot too, and she wanted compensation for her patriotic efforts, but she doesn't get very much recognition, although the National Park and the Concord Museum, of course, recognize her. But if this is actually her house, we need to know that. And it's kind of hidden away on, where is it, Court Lane, and it's not on any typical lists, and not in the Battle Road Scenic Byway Plan. Another one that just came up before the HDC was the Widow Whore House, and the Macros form says it dates to 1750 about, and it's on Concord Green. So if it's actually at that date and it was on Concord Green, this is another house that was right in the thick of the action. And why is it not on these witness house lists? So we just need to better understand that. And then this, of course, it would be and is on the Battle Road Scenic Byway list of witness houses, but it's another good example of a structure that's come up before the HDC and the Historical Commission recently. They were proposing alterations to the rear of the house. And of course, as a former curator of a National Historic Landmark, the back of the house is also super important, because that is where, the underappreciated people came and went. You know, that's where deliveries happened. That's where servants and enslaved people would have entered and exited the house. So, you know, the studies of all of the people actually affect, you know, how we approach preserving the structure too. So that's just a very quick overview. I was just wondering if you had questions.
Thank you, Anne. Our leads on these two on this application, I believe, are Eve and Sarah. Eve.
Thank you, Anne. I just love digging into historic background and houses as well and structures. I just have a couple of quick questions. Is the ultimate goal to update the MACRIS? I've actually surprised people with MACRIS lists that their house was on the MACRIS list myself, and homeowners don't like that when you bring that to their attention sometimes. But is the goal to have like a tour or just to discover, you know, interesting anecdotes and record them for, you know, sort of posterity? Or what do you think is going to be the bigger picture result of this study?
Right, it would be to update the MACRIS forms, because this is, you know, this is historic preservation funding, so it would need to be updating the MACRIS forms, and yet those MACRIS forms are what everyone refers to when they're developing programming and tours. So to get that information accurate on the MACRIS forms is just so critical. It's really, you know, it's our obligation. In museums, of course, we have a code of ethics, right? And it's to provide accurate information. So, you know, if the you know, some of these stories are wonderful, but are they actually true? You know, they're passed down through oral tradition. So I think we need to do our best to figure out whether they're true or not.
And Eve, there are a lot of people, Eve, on that own these houses, the witness houses, that are very interested in being part of that community.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. That's exactly what my next question was, is if you have to alert, or if you should, or will you alert the homeowners where these houses are privately owned, or, you know, the landlords in some cases, that this research is being done? And does it matter if they know or not, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think it does. I think it does. And I think if the owners are made aware of it, I think they'll be jumping on that bandwagon and maybe putting a flag, or maybe putting some type of plaque or marker on their house to show that.
Right. This was actually a request from the 250th, I think it was Publicity Community Engagement Committee. They were the ones who brought this to us. And they did want to reach out to the homeowners, but it wasn't clear, you know, which houses are we're standing at that point, which one are witness houses, and so we're trying to look into that. But legally, we're not required to get the permission of the property owner. These are really just surveys. It's just informational. If we were to want to nominate them for the National Register, then you do need the permission of the property owner.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Anne. That's super important. My last question is, are you looking at, like, well, may seem ridiculous, but I do have a point. Are you looking at whole houses, or houses where they have been modified already, or some portion of it is remaining? I just wondered what the scope of this work is because I'm blown away that there might be 90 houses that are pre-1775 and still standing. So if a house is, you know, 3/4 of the way there, or 1/4, what do you have a metric for that?
Not at this point. I think that the survey will help with that. I mean, the planning planning project that's just starting up now will help us narrow down the list.
And there are a lot of houses that, you know, are not in their original footprint,
right,
from the 1700s. So whether they added a coal bin or a storage locker, or, you know, a place for their vegetables and meat, there aren't a whole lot of them that are original.
Exactly. That there might be one that, you know, has an original portion of it, but the rest of it is a a renovated, to that post, 21st century addition on the back of it usually, or whatever. And I was just wondering if those houses are going to make it onto your list.
Right, probably not. And right, some of them have been so altered that none of the original fabric is evident. So why would we highlight it? Right, and I think I was just looking at a list of houses. I was looking at an article from the 1790s, and it mentioned that there are 250 houses in town in the 1790s. So it's kind of interesting that if there are really 90 houses left, like, I mean, that's pretty significant.
Very surprised. I think there's probably not.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. That's the end of my questions.
Sue, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, I just want some clarification on this. You've mentioned the 250th as part of your proposal. I note that your completion date is in the end of June of 2025. So how are you viewing this as part of the 250th? That in order to honor the anniversary of the revolution, this project should be undertaken, or that the results of this project would somehow contribute toward the 250th celebration? Because of course, the results will not be available until after the peak celebrating time.
Exactly. I know. I wish we had done this 5 years ago, right? And I did try to, I think we're going to be working on it this year, sort of narrowing down the list. But the funding would allow us to bring in the consultant. I did try to push the schedule forward as much as I could, so that we do have a better sense for the 250th, but it may actually just be a way to sort of highlight the field of preservation and the value of preservation during the 250th without actually contributing to the story in the way that we'd like, just because we don't have the information quite yet. But we'll do our best to get as much done to, feed into the celebrations. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So, and just for my own understanding, the end result of this is a summary report that is then used by, is that correct? And then if so, who does that go to and how is that used?
Right. It would be updated Form Bs, the survey forms that are submitted to the state. And so they would be included in that MACRIS
Okay.
database. And there's, of course, MACRIS maps too. So those are, it's a database of all of the cultural resources in Massachusetts.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Okay, with no further questions, I think that brings us to the last application for the evening, which is Anne, on you. That's the staff and pardon me, Alan, thank you very much for your time and input this evening. And Anne, you've got the staff and technical services application, which we're all generally quite familiar with.
That's right. So, right, every year, the CPC has a certain percentage that it can allocate toward staff and professional services. Actually, I haven't even looked at this one because I was working on the other one. And I think it's, 15% that you could, the statute allows for 5%.
It allows for 5%, and I think we're running at about half of that. Yeah.
Right. Yep. So this is just our annual request to fund staff, a portion of my salary, and minute taking, sometimes signs, and other sort of our membership in the state coalition, and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm assuming you don't have a formal presentation on this, as this is pretty straightforward. So, yeah. So just jumping into it, and I am the lead on this one. It looks like it says in recent years we were, and I guess this was probably last year, we were at 40,000. So we're up pretty significantly this year. Do you know what's driving the increase? I mean, that's an increase of like, what is that, about 14% or something?
Let's see. Yes, and there were, let's see, that I think I wrote in the application that the amount that was allocated last year did not actually cover the costs of staff and technical services for the CPC last year, so the town ended up paying for it. And so we're suggesting that the allocation be increased to actually cover the costs.
And we've got the breakdown of costs. So one very clear one is the CPC membership dues, $4,500. The salary, the other legal and technical consulting services and supplies, are those? I'm just wondering, is the town actually sort of accounting for these things line by line and figuring out which things are attributable to our work? I wonder specifically, like in terms of when we go and reach out to town council for input on, as we already have this year on the whether applications fit within the scope of the CPA, things like that. Are those actually being tracked through, and that we're running at about 7,000 per year on legal fees? Do you know? Or is that a sort of a spitball number?
Yes, that is, I think last year the legal fees really were much higher than ever before because of the municipal affordable housing trust issue and the Grecian Village issue. So they're and I think this year too, there may be another need for a separate article. So, right, legal fees have increased.
Okay, so in the past, I've was under the impression that the town was just sort of covering those fees and not sort of separately allocating them to the CPC. But it's your understanding now that those are allocated. What would happen if we run over $7,000 in legal fees?
Then the town would cover that.
Okay. Do you have a sense? So we went on a little bit of a sign buying spree a few years ago. We got some of the larger signs that went up around a few projects, some more permanent signs, and we were moving signs around. Are we now spending $3,000 a year on signs? Do you know? Are we having new signs made this year?
We have a few signs left.
Okay.
So, right, we'll see. I suppose this year there are a lot of brick and mortar projects. So yeah, so we probably would be spending more on signs.
One of the things, so obviously this application is a very standard application and I think is always strongly supported by the committee. But one of the things I'm just wondering about is, as it seems to me that there's been a little bit of a shift we had an application that sort of generally allocated some cost to take it off the town's books and bring it out of the CPC funding, rightfully associated with the cost of running this committee. We're getting a little more specific in terms of line items. And I'm going to guess that's because we've been overly generously treated by the town on things like covering our legal costs, and so it's being tracked a little closely, which just makes me think forward to how we are closing out these projects at the end of the year in terms of seeing how the actual costs break down in terms of what we've spent on these administrative costs, because that would be helpful to see. It might make us more sensitive about going to town council. It may make us think twice about buying new signs and so forth. I mean, we're running at a pretty, I think we're running at about 2.5% of our funding is going to these administrative fees, which is a great deal. And we, of course, very much appreciate the staff help, but I think it would just be helpful as we get more specific on these to see that. That's more of a comment than a question specifically on the application. Nancy, I see your hand raised.
I've always had a question about what 5% would look like. I didn't do the math before the meeting. But I think for something like the Wright Tavern or other really historic structures that are being funded by CPC, that it would be allowable to hire a consultant to help monitor, particularly if there aren't people on CPC's committee who are experts in historic architecture and restoration, preservation, rehabilitation. So has anybody done the 5% of what's available this year? I didn't
I
do
think
it.
I think that would be roughly in the range of $90,000 to $100,000 total would be 5%. I think we're right somewhere between 1.8 and 2 million.
In terms of that's what the 5% would look like. Well, that's interesting to me because I think we could be do some really creative things within that 5%. So I just think we should maybe think beyond just covering the costs of signs and staff. That's all.
And it would be interesting to think about what that would look like, is that we're allocating money towards administrative overhead, including those things. And then that money could sit there for some cycles for when something like the Right Tavern came along and we might want to have a consultant. Because of course we need we need to plan a year and a half in advance for those things. Yeah. That's a very good point.
But technically it can't sit there for a couple of cycles. For some reason, for the administrative funds, that's closed out every single year. So if the money isn't spent, it goes back into the
Interesting.
only that portion of the budget.
Well, maybe we just need to plan ahead. Develop our own project.
Interesting. Okay.
Anyway, that's all.
Thank you very much. Committee, we managed to get through 7 applications in 2 hours in under 2 hours, which means we kept to about 17 minutes per application. So that's fantastic. So thank you all. We have no minutes to approve. We have no additional business. Edward, you've raised your hand.
So I just wanted to apologize. I lost my internet connection for a short while. And I did have a couple of questions I was going to ask Robin and Janet from the Robbins house. Is it possible I could send those to Anne and maybe she could forward to Jen, and maybe, I'm not sure that they really are that important. One of them has to do with the Barrett House, and I know Nancy is, well aware of what goes on in the national park. So maybe she could, provide us some information if what the feeling at the national park level is about the Cesar Robbins house. So, but anyway, but the other questions were for Jen, and could I do that through Anne, and maybe everyone could see the answers once she provides. And I apologize for my
that's quite all right.
Verizon, but it may have been me. So,
and would you be able to convey those? Okay, great. All right,
is that okay, Anne? Okay, thanks. Thank you.
And Paul.
Yeah, so Bert, I have a question. So I presume starting our next meeting, we're going to start to deliberate. And we're going to have some pretty challenging deliberations, I predict. When do we find out about our budget? Because our deliberations, I don't know if they start with the budget, but they certainly are going to be looking at it pretty closely.
Certainly framed by the budget, yeah.
When does that happen, Anne?
Right. So I just received I think they call it the CP2 report or something that has the finances for last year. So I asked the same question. Like, I think now that report is complete, we can get access to, the predictions for next year. So those emails were flying today, but we don't have the numbers yet. But I would expect them to come in very soon. So we have them before the next meeting.
Okay, great.
And Paul, we're also going to have some details to work through in terms of funds that may be recouped, some particularly significant funds that may be recouped from prior projects, and figuring out the logistics of those to see what can be applied to this year or what needs to go through a cycle. We've got some questions on that. So
yeah, there was a meeting on Warner's Pond in the Shover Bakery, and one of the questions was about prior funding, and Delia basically said that she thought that the funds would have to be the prior funds would have to be reallocated, so that kind of that's part of our challenge, trying to figure out when and how and if that's done. But I just that it was Delia's response that got me.
Yeah, well, I think she's correct that their first two funding tranches would need to be reallocated if the ultimate outcome is something other than than dredging. There was though also a housing project, which was that that Main Street project. It was a CHA project that ended up essentially being funded through Habitat, and I think there's about $200,000. And is that the right number?
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah, something like
That that would be coming back to CPC. So that's already been established that that's coming back and could potentially be very timing given the amount of housing applications we received this cycle. One thing I forgot to ask on the last meeting is, speaking of housing, there's a desire from CHA for the Assabet Bluff project, which, as a refresher for folks, there's two existing units on Old Marlborough Road, and then there will be three houses developed on the bluffs to put up a sign talking about the folks that the different committees that have contributed to that project being created. There's a sign already for the sort of the natural the land preservation portion of it that was put up that lists the Concord Land Foundation, the Sudbury Ballet trustees, and so forth. And there was a discussion of putting up a sign by the housing portion. My thought and my initial feedback was I don't like the idea of putting up signs advertising that certain housing or that could implicate that the housing is affordable housing. But I thought it might be reasonable to do it during the construction phase if it was not a lot of money spent on a sign and that was being put up so people would appreciate the work that's being done on affordable housing in town. But I wanted to poll this committee before I sort of gave an answer back. Does anybody, I guess, let me first ask, does anybody think that this CPC, it would be appropriate for CPC's name to be on a sign if it was a permanent sign? Ed, you got your hand raised?
You know, it's very important that we maintain the the status of tenants there, and I think there's a state law that says we can't just tell there's confidentiality that's required. So I think by putting CPC on there, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily for affordable or low income housing, but I think that the important is to give credit where credit's due, but not to implicate that that the people that are living there are of lower income.
My concern, and the point was made that CPC doesn't have anything in it that says affordable or low income housing in our name, but it would be on a sign that says CHDC, CHA, CPC, Assabet Bluffs housing. And to me, you don't have to read the Concord Bridge too much to know that's affordable housing in our town, right? And so Mike, I thought maybe during development it's fine, but once families are moving in there, I wouldn't want to see that sign up there. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Only half of that funding, CPC funding, was for housing. The other half is for open space.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's appropriate it doesn't necessarily point to the half of funding for housing. So in recognition of the open space funding, certainly there should be a sign, I think.
Okay. The issue is there is a sign already up that's essentially designating the open space, and that ship sailed without the CPC being aboard. So
there's a CPC sign?
No. I don't believe the sign does mention CPC. It was put up. It talks about the town of Concord, and it talks about the the two land trusts that contributed, and maybe maybe other folk. And maybe it generically mentions the people that in the community that donated.
Wow. I don't know. $500,000 probably deserves some recognition, but that's my comment.
Okay. Eve?
If we're having individual moments of discussion for this, my personal vote would be no sign. I think there are plenty of other opportunities for CPC to put up signs on the Bruce Freeman rail trail around the cemetery, if that happens, or any of these other projects that we've got. And I understand that there's already a sign that our name is not on it, but even to the Habitat house that's on Main Street, like having a big Habitat sign in front of it, you end up with a NIMBY or a stigma with neighbors. It's just, I don't think that that's something we want to participate in. And I think if anyone wants to know what CPC is doing, all they have to do is come to town meeting or read the bridge, and they can see what our projects are. That's my opinion.
Okay, all right. So we've sort of got one in favor, one. Paul wishes we could have this on maybe the
I
different
think
sign.
we just discussed signage, and I think we have a history of signage for various projects, so.
Thought they were- Well,
Yeah, I would like to see the construction sign type thing that Milton Burton is supporting.
Okay, sign during construction. Okay, and I think that may be the way they're going because I think they wanted to originally replicate the sign that the trust, the land acquisition trust put up, but that's a very fine sign, and the price was quite dear, I think, and so I think that they were deciding, in fact, that maybe something that was a little less permanent would be appropriate. Nancy, your thoughts?
I thought there were requirements for posting CPC signage during development and construction, and maybe even afterwards. I know at the Barrett House, it's on the inside of the house, but it's clearly visible. Even now, after many years, I thought there was a legal requirement for display of CPC because
Interesting.
CPA, because they do want that credit.
I could look into that and see if there is a requirement.
You wouldn't have to say what it's for necessarily, or
yeah,
I don't know.
I think that the head of the housing the CHA was making the point that you couldn't really know you wouldn't really know what it was for because it wouldn't say, but it's going to say the Concord Housing Development Corporation and the Concord Housing Authority and the CPC. I think it's pretty clear, and that it is public investment in housing. But let me look into that. I mean, one thing I know we've had a few years ago, we said we need to put up better signs, and we invested in some signs. I'm actually a little wary about signs cropping up all over town. I'm reminded of how up until the Baker administration, they'd change all the highway signs on the pike because it would say like Paul Salucci, on all the highway signs. And I thought to myself, how much money do we spend on new highway signs every administration? And then Baker said, don't put my name on the signs, just put signs up and leave them. I'm a little wary about spending money on signs rather than the projects, and also just the proliferation of signs. If we continue to have the support of the town and be a committee in 100 years, where there's going to be a sign on everything. Anyway, so we're kind of mixed. I think the consensus is between the yes, no, and maybe during construction is that I'll go back and say that we would like recognition, but as long as it's just during the construction phase.
One other suggestion: there are other locations. There's signage that talks about the housing, but this is a big property, and it's accessible from Bruce Freeman. There could be a CPC sign, which is kind of on the open space side of that, which is
sure, and that's in fact where that open space sign is, and maybe we could revisit that sign and get a CPC sign added to the post.
Maybe there should be one
that is quite distinctly separate from where the housing would be, Paul, and there would be no implication if our sign was down there, and so maybe and I'll maybe talk to you about that. Okay. Anybody have anything else they wanted to cover this evening? Nope. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So adjourn us, Burton. You don't have to have a motion.
All right. Okay. Then I so declare we're adjourned at 9:10.
Until November 14 and 21.
Oh yeah, this is a busy period. The 21st. That's Thanksgiving week, isn't it?
Thanksgiving's the 23rd.
think we
Yep.
just reserved dates just in case you needed them, but if you don't need them, you don't need to.
Okay, yeah, Eve, might need to talk to you about the 21st. I will be coaching a ski camp in Colorado and will be sound asleep by this hour at that time. So
I think we've already had other people mention that they weren't going to be there and from before. So maybe we see what we can get done on the 14th.
okay.
Right,
All right.
another meeting
Bring
on
your
December 5th.
succinctly made points to that meeting. All right. Thank you all for your attention and participation tonight. We moved efficiently. Thanks so much.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.